Last Friday, in a Brisbane court, one of Australia's most horrendous crimes was finally solved when 78-year-old Vince O'Dempsey was found guilty of murdering young mother Barbara McCulkin and her two daughters. The evil thug O'Dempsey will now die in prison, along with another monster, his 70-year-old co-accused Garry Dubois, who was convicted in a separate trial late last year. The murders happened 43 years ago and had been Queensland's most notorious and longest-running cold case. That the brutal crime was solved at all is a tribute to the dedication of two unassuming police detectives who convinced two vital witnesses to do the unthinkable, to break the criminal code of silence. It's a Wednesday evening in 1974 in the Brisbane suburb of Highgate Hill. A young mother, Barbara McCulkin, and her daughters, Vicki and Leanne, are led by two men to a bright orange Valiant Charger. They're driven to an unknown bush clearing where they're raped and killed. Their bodies are never found. For 43 years, it has been one of Queensland's most haunting unsolved crimes. But not anymore. We now know two of the most sadistic criminals Australia's ever seen. Vince O'Dempsey and Garry "Shorty" Dubois did it.
They were separated from their mother. O'Dempsey took her off into the darkness.
But for decades, O'Dempsey and Dubois lived their lives believing they'd never be caught.
He said, "They'll never catch me because I'll never find the bodies."
They thought their secret was safe, but they were wrong, because these two men broke the criminal code of silence. And these two police detectives were relentless in tracking down the truth.
It was, oh my God, we're going to solve this.
For those in the know back then, 40 years ago, behind the respectable facade, Brisbane was blighted with a dark underbelly of rampant organised crime, extensive police corruption and blatantly corrupt politicians. A lot has since changed, but not here at Dorchester Street in Highgate Hill. This tiny workers' cottage where the McColgan family lived is still frozen in time, much like its residents from 1974. Barbara McCulkin was 34. Her husband, Billy, was not just an abusive philanderer, but also a well-known crook. The couple had two young daughters, Leanne, 11, and Vicki, 13.
She was lovely, and her photos in the paper don't do her justice, and she was hard-working, and she loved her children.
Ellen Gilbert was a close friend who worked with Barbara at a milk bar.
Barbara has done no wrong except being with her husband, Bill.
Billy was a criminal.
Yes, definitely.
And in the course of that friendship, did you become aware that there were bad men that she knew?
Oh, definitely, yes.
Through Billy McColgan, Barbara got to know Vince O'Dempsey, another crook with a fearsome reputation for extreme violence. What she probably didn't know was that as a teenager, he'd been diagnosed as a psychopath. He was a regular visitor at the McColgan home.
He was picking Barbara up that first time I saw him, and Barbara came over to me and said that was Vincent O'Dempsey.
Did Barbara talk to you about Vince O'Dempsey's violent reputation?
Yes, she said he was a very violent man, and at one stage she told me that he was working on the Leslie Dam up on the Darling Downs, and that he'd kill the man and put him under a slab of the dam.
Did she ever refer to knowing anything that might get her into trouble?
I think Barbara knew a lot.
In fact, Barbara knew too much about 2 nightclub firebombings which happened 11 days apart in Brisbane. And what she knew would ultimately lead to her and her daughter's murders. The 25th of February, 1973. A blast echoes through Brisbane's Fortitude Valley as Torinos nightclub goes up in flames.
We ran a petrol trail out the back. What we didn't realise, at the time between lighting it and pouring the petrol around, the fumes had built up and it exploded. It blew the whole shop front out onto the street, nearly blowing glass and stuff onto us.
Peter Hall was one of a gang of crims hired to firebomb Torinos nightclub. An insurance job organised by Garry "Shorty" Dubois on Vince O'Dempsey's orders. Did you ever meet O'Dempsey?
Oh yeah, met him on a few occasions.
How did he strike you?
Scary. If you looked at his eyes are coal black. They really unnerve a person when you looked into his eyes.
What was the feeling in the group about the job that you did on the Torino?
We were pretty happy with the money and that.
But their jubilation was short-lived because less than 2 weeks later, in March 1973, another firebombing rocked Brisbane. This time, 15 people were killed inside the Whisky A Go Go nightclub. At the time, it was Australia's worst mass murder.
Yeah, it was panic stations when we found out about the whiskey. Thought if they ever found out about Torinos, they would try and link us to that.
So, did you have any knowledge of the Whisky A Go Go bombing?
No, it was two big different things. The whiskey was full of people. There was no one in Torinos.
Peter Hall swears he wasn't involved in the whiskey arson attack, but one of 2 men later convicted of the crime was an associate of Vince O'Dempsey and a close friend of Barbara McCulkin's husband, Billy. Do you think she knew something about the Whisky A Go Go bombing?
Yeah, I think she knew enough to get herself into trouble.
Detective Sergeant Virginia Gray and Detective Inspector Mick Dowie of Queensland's Cold Case Unit believe at this point Barbara had to be silenced because she might have implicated Vince O'Dempsey and his thug sidekick Shorty Dubois in the Whisky A Go Go mass murder.
One of the motives, I believe, how it worked anyway now, is that Barbara knew something. She has revealed what she knew, and albeit it could have been O'Dempsey or it could have been Dubois. We don't know.
9 months on from the Whisky A Go Go murders, it's the 16th of January 1974. It's Janine Gayton's 10th birthday, and she's waiting for neighbours Vicki and Leanne McCulkin to come over for cake. Two men pull up in a bright orange Charger, and she watches them go into the McCulkin house. A few minutes later, Janine and her sister Janet cross the road to collect the McCulkin girls.
Hi, who are they? That's Shorty and that's Vince.
Janet at least recognised one man she knew as Vince, who had previously been at the address and was known to her. The other man was referred to as Shorty.
Vicki and Leanne spend the evening at their friend's birthday party and are home by around 10 p.m. Little do they know, they and their mother are about to be lured to their deaths.
Barbara, Vicki and Leanne left the house that night in the company of O'Dempsey and Dubois, and they've never been seen again.
Coming up, a gang's code of silence finally broken.
You lived by a code. You never gave anyone up to the police, no matter what.
For the first time, the full story. What really happened to the McColgans? If the police hadn't come and given you a hard time, would you have ever come forward?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask me that.
That's next on 60 Minutes.